In this video, I'd like to take a look at GMAT strategy, the major differentiator between those who score really high on the GMAT and those who don't. And specifically, we're going to tackle the #1 question I most hear from my students. My guess is it's a question that you yourself have, and if you're just starting your GMAT journey, I guarantee you it's something that you're going to kind of be thinking about, and it's something that you'll have questions about in the future as well. Hi, my name is Brett Etheridge, founder of Dominate the GMAT, and I've helped hundreds of students just like you dramatically increase their GMAT scores and get into the business schools of their choice all over the world. Now, this is the second video in this series about the 3 crucial components essential to getting a good GMAT score: content, strategy, and then execution, ultimately bringing it all together and having a game plan for really executing on everything that I'm teaching you in these videos. Now, in the first video, if you remember, I talked about the fact that the GMAT is really a means to an end. You know, it's a necessary evil. It stands between you and business school, between the next chapter of your life, between your future life dreams and goals and aspirations. But the good news, if you remember, is that I talked about how the GMAT is a beatable test. You know, thank you to everybody who watched that video, who left comments. If you haven't watched it, I encourage you to do so. Click on the link at the top of this page, go back and watch it, and thank you also for your comments. You know, it's obvious that you guys really benefited from the score boosting strategy that I taught you in that first video. But more than that, I just really appreciate your questions, and it gives me a better idea of the types of things that you're looking for and the things that you're concerned about when it comes to the GMAT, so that I can address those in this video and future videos. You know, but I did mention that it's a beatable test, and there's no better proof of that than my student Keith Richards. You know, here you see his email, and I talked about him in the last video as well. And I talked about how he was in the low 500s for his first practice test. You know, and he attributed most of that to the fact that he was terrible at math. He had no math background at all. Now, obviously, he ended up scoring a 710 and was ecstatic about that, right? And so you see his email here, but what you don't know is other conversations we had. And in fact, he called me up and he said, Brett, he said, it's the tricks and the strategies you taught me that were so crucial, that kind of opened my eyes and enabled me to get right answers on certain math questions that I didn't necessarily have the math foundation to be able to solve, but you showed me ways to get right answers. And that is so crucial, right? Content matters. You have to know what's actually on the test. You got to learn something about triangles and quadratic equations and grammar rules, right? But it's only half the battle. What if you could learn to do the same problem much faster? What if you could improve your guessing odds dramatically, right? So that on questions that you weren't quite sure how to do, you're now in a better position to guess and get the question right. What if you were able to very quickly and accurately identify wrong answer choices? That's almost as helpful sometimes as getting right answers. And most importantly, and this is what we're going to focus on in this video, the #1 thing that I hear from my students is this. They say, Brett, sometimes I look at a question and I just don't know how to begin. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever been there? Have you ever looked at a question and you're thinking to yourself, and it takes you forever to kind of get going and figure out how to move forward? You know, sometimes I hear my students say, Brett, it's so easy when you do it, but when I see it, I kind of freeze up and I don't know how to get started. What if I could show you some strategies, some simple strategies, so that you would quickly and effectively, immediately, be able to know exactly how to move forward on certain types of common GMAT math questions. And by the way, to do so without having to do complex and annoying algebra. Yeah, absolutely, that'd be worth a lot of right answers for you on test day. So that's what we're going to tackle. That's what we're going to go through in this video in just a minute. But I actually want to say a quick word real quick about content. I want to go back to what we were talking about content, because obviously in all of my courses and a la carte videos, video lessons, I obviously teach all the content you need as well. Strategy also isn't enough. You got to know the content. But what a lot of students don't know is all of the free resources I offer. And I'd like to just show you one of them real quick. Obviously, I offer a lot of free content in my blog, in my weekly GMAT newsletter, but there's also a lot of great stuff out there for you on my YouTube channel. Okay, so here you see my YouTube channel, and it's very easy. Just go to youtube.com and type in Dominate the GMAT. And if you click on videos here, you'll see all sorts of videos. And what you can do is you can actually sort by most popular. So that'll give you a sense of which videos people are finding most beneficial. And so when you think about content, obviously one of the things that's important to know how to do is geometry, and specifically finding an area of a shaded region. So let's say, for example, you want to learn some of that content. Here you see my second most popular video with over 16,500 views is a video about finding the area of a shaded region. So you can obviously click on that, watch the video, and then you see some other videos that you can watch as well. Okay, so there you have some good ideas about where you can go find some more content, but let's get back to strategy and let's really dive into this idea of strategy and specifically this question, right? Where do I begin? And this issue of sometimes when you sit down and you see a question, whether it's popping up on your computer screen or even if you're just working from a book, and it says, it gives you the question, how do I even begin to tackle this thing? And it's crucial because time is everything on the GMAT, and your ability to quickly identify what type of problem you're looking at and then immediately know how to tackle that question, that's gold. And if you learn what I'm about to teach you in this video, it's going to not only be worth a ton of points to you, but it's going to also, I think, give you more peace of mind to understand that, hey, I'm in control here. I know how to beat this test. It doesn't own me. So there are really four major categories. There are more than 4 strategies on the GMAT, and there are nuanced strategies and really advanced 700 plus strategies, and we'll teach all of them to you eventually. But here I want to start with the biggies. These are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. They're going to apply to the most number of GMAT math questions, right? And so what I want you to do is I want you to learn the criteria, so again, that when you see a question, you immediately know, hey, this falls into this category, or this falls into this category, or, oh, this is one of these types of questions. I now immediately know how I should proceed and how I should move forward. So the first category, the first criteria, is when the answers are all numbers, right? And so this says answers equals numbers. But when the answers are all numbers, you immediately say, I know how to proceed. Now I'm going to teach you how in a second, but take a look at this example. Here you see a typical GMAT problem-solving question about Jason and his washer fluid, right? And I don't know, as you sit here and you take some time to read this question, whether you think this is difficult or not. But for a lot of you, you might be looking at this type of math for the first time in a while. It's one of these annoying mixture problems, this word problem where you're supposed to be combining summer mixture and winter mixture, and how many ounces of washer fluid should Jason add in order to produce the winter mixture, and so forth. But what do you notice about the answer choices? Ding, ding, ding. Answers are all numbers. In fact, you look, you see the answers are all numbers. What does that enable us to quickly do? The best strategy for questions like this is a strategy called working backwards. Right? The bottom line is you take those answer choices, you plug them back into the question, rather than solving the normal way and doing complex algebra and trying to figure out how to set up an algebraic equation, you simply work backwards. Now, I'm not going to go through this. I'm not going to go into complete detail on this strategy. I teach it in detail in the free session that I offer through my website. So here you see, you literally just click on the free session tab on my website, give me your email address, and I'll send it to you straight away. And I'll go into a lot more detail. I'll show you exactly how to solve this particular question, but I'll also give you some other ideas on working backwards. So that's criteria number 1. It's that Pavlovian response of saying, hey, I see a question, the answers are all numbers. Maybe the best strategy for me will be to work backwards, and you now know how to proceed. You still have to learn how to do the math in some cases, as you'll see in the free session, but you know how to proceed. Strategy number 2, or criteria number 2 rather, is a situation where you have variables. You have variables in the questions and you have variables in the answer choices, as you see in this example. So you have Lois who has X dollars and Jim and he's got some sort of dollars, and together they have Y dollars, and you look at the answer choices and you might break out into a cold sweat thinking to yourself, what in the heck do I do? Well, what do you do? First and foremost, you recognize the criteria. You have some criteria. The test makers want you to solve this algebraically. They want you to think back to high school math and figure out how to solve this question. But you have variables. And Brett said that if I see a question with variables, there's going to be a good strategy for that. And the best strategy is a strategy called making up numbers. So let me take a second, and I actually want to teach this one. We're going to take a look. I want you to press pause. I want you to give this problem a try, and then I'm going to walk you step by step through how to actually use the make up numbers strategy. Okay, so how did you do? Well, what makes this question difficult? What makes the question difficult is the fact that we have some variables. We have X dollars, well, what in the heck does that mean? And we got Y dollars, what in the heck does that mean? And we got answer choices with all variables. So the strategy is to make up numbers. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is you literally want to make up numbers for the variables. Because what that's going to enable you to do is actually solve the problem using real concrete numbers. And what you're going to find is that math is a whole lot easier if you're actually using real numbers. Like, what if instead of X dollars we have, I don't know, $5, right? I literally just made that up. So let's say we have X equal to 5. What does that mean? Well, now it means that Lois has $5 more than Jim. Does it make sense that that makes the problem a whole lot easier to work with real numbers, right? So now we have a situation where we have Jim has a certain number of dollars and Lois has a certain number of dollars, and what we know is that Lois simply now has $5 more than Jim. Well, how many dollars do you want to say Jim has? I don't know, let's say Jim has $10. Well, if Lois has X dollars more, okay, forget the X, we just determined that X equals 5, right? So she has $5 more. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that Lois has, ding, 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 $15, right? Piece of cake. That's it. And together they have Y dollars. Well, Y is actually set in stone because if Jim has 10 and Lois, that means, has 15, their total is 25. So in this case, I'm not really arbitrarily making up a number for Y. Y is dictated by what X happens to be. So if X is 5 and I let Jim equal $10, so it's almost like there's an extra variable, right? What is Jim? Jim is J. Even though the problem doesn't give us Jim as a variable, we have to recognize that the problem is going to be a whole lot easier if I just say Jim has $10 or $80 or $1 million. You can literally make up whatever number you want, but of course it helps to use easy numbers. So now we have X equals 5, that means Y equals 25, and now we can actually answer the question. So the next step is literally just to answer the question using real numbers. Which is the number of dollars that Jim has? So here's the question. How many dollars does Jim have? Jim is what? Well, I already determined that Jim is $10. So here's what we do. Let's plug our numbers, X equals 5 and Y equals 25, back into the answer choices, right? We worked with real numbers to solve the question. Now let's use those same real numbers to see which answer choice matches our answer. We already know the answer. The answer is $10, right? Jim has $10. But with regard to X and Y, we need to plug them back in, right? So if I hope I'm not losing you because this is going to become very obvious once I now show you. So let's start with answer choice A. Answer choice A is Y minus X. Okay, well, Y is 25, X is 5. We made those numbers up, remember, divided by 2, right? That's 20 divided by 2 equals 10. Ooh, wait a second. That means answer choice A, forget the variables. A literally now represents 10. 10 what? $10. $10 that Jim has. Well, is that correct? Absolutely, that's what we already determined when we solved the problem that Jim had. Jim has $10. Therefore, A is the answer. Now, I got lucky that A happened to be the answer. If it wasn't, I might have to test some additional answer choices. Like, let's say I had tested D first, right? 2 times Y, which is 25, minus X is 5. So we have 50 minus 5 equals 45. Nope, that's not right. That's not right. Y minus 2X, nope, that's not right. We just happen to get lucky that A is correct. Now, early in the section, you might want to test some of the other answer choices to make sure you didn't make a mistake. Later in the test, just go with it. A equals 10, I just figured that out. That is absolutely the answer. So that is how you actually solve these types of questions by making up numbers. And I hope you see how valuable this strategy can be, where we're substituting variables for real numbers and it turns an otherwise difficult, challenging question into a much easier one. In fact, let me point this out. This question is taken from the GMAT Review official guide. It is question 184. What significance does that have? Well, in this book, the questions get progressively harder as you move from question 1 into the 200s. What does that mean? That means the test makers think that this is a hard question. It's number 184. It's way up there, right? They think this is a hard question, but you have just rendered it easy by making up numbers. So there you have it, criteria number 2, right? We recognized in that problem that we had a question that contains variables, and we immediately know how to proceed. Literally make up variables or real numbers for your variables and solve the problem. And this will apply on a large number of questions. And by the way, this is a strategy that works not only on problem solving, but also data sufficiency questions, right? So it opens the whole GMAT up to a large number of potential questions that this criteria is going to apply to. The answers being all numbers is really only a problem solving criteria. You're not going to have situations like that to be able to work backwards with data sufficiency questions, but certainly with the variables, that's a great strategy as well. The third criteria, again, we sit down, we see a question, and lo and behold, what do we have? It's really hard. Okay, so that's a little bit less concrete to know what that means. But sometimes you see a question. Maybe it's a number theory question. Maybe it's a really hard algebra question involving exponents or something like that. And it's just really hard and you can't quite get your mind around it. There's still a way that you can proceed. There's a strategy for that. And the strategy is called, wouldn't it be nice if, right? So this is actually an acronym I use, and I haven't seen this taught anywhere else. I taught for a leading GMAT prep company for a number of years. I've attended, obviously, attended all sorts of competitor classes just to get an idea of what people are doing, and I do not see this strategy tested. And yet for me, it makes the most sense in the world. And it's a strategy, so again, it stands for wouldn't it be nice if? And basically it's a way to conceptualize making an easier version of the harder problem. Okay, so the problem is a hard one, you're not quite sure what to do, and you think to yourself, okay, but Brett said that's actually a criteria. I need to start to think creatively a little bit. I need to start to do something else. I'm going to see if I can create an easier version of the same problem. Now, I'm not going to go through an example with you because I actually have a great blog post that explains this strategy in detail. So here you see my website, and if again you just click blog, the blog tab at the top, and in the search area, you can just type in WIBNI or wouldn't it be nice if, whatever you search for, this article will come up. And it's a strategy about the WIBNI math trick. And it will walk you step by step through everything you need to know to be able to solve this question. Which brings us to our final criteria, right? And this is really, really important and really, really useful on the GMAT. Why? Because it involves figures, geometry questions. Questions where it pops up on your screen and you either see a figure or you actually recognize that it's a geometry question where there is no figure. Nevertheless, we know how to proceed. Now there are two things to understand about figures on the GMAT, right? Figures on the GMAT, if it is a problem-solving question, the figures are assumed to be drawn to scale. If it's a data sufficiency question, they are not assumed to be drawn to scale, and there are different strategies accordingly. But this is the trigger for the Pavlovian response that says, wait a second, I recognize a figure, crap, I'm not really good at geometry, or I don't know how to do this question. Don't worry about it. We're going to know immediately how to proceed. Why? Because the strategy is one of two potential things. If it's a question that you think requires a figure and none is given, draw a figure. If there is a figure and it's a problem-solving question, trust it. The strategy then is to eyeball a right answer. If it is a data sufficiency question, you may want to redraw the figure to scale or manipulate the figure accordingly. So I know this can be a little bit confusing. There are a few more nuances to questions involving figures, but let's take a look at this question to show you what I mean. Here you see a question involving circles and parallel lines cut by a transverse. I mean, there's a lot going on in this question. And it's a more advanced type of GMAT geometry question, right? We have PQ parallel to OR. OR has a length of 18. What is minor arc? The length of minor arc, PQ. And you see a bunch of answer choices involving pi and so forth. So how do you proceed? A lot of students will freak out. A lot of students will say, Brett, I don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to proceed. What do I do? You need to get a right answer. Remember at the very beginning of this video I said it is a means to an end. I almost don't care if you learn a whole lot of geometry as long as you can get a right answer. And this triggers this strategy. So this question involves a figure, and remember I said you immediately know a strategy, which is to eyeball a right answer if the figure is drawn to scale. If it's not drawn to scale, redraw to scale. But this question on your screen here is clearly a problem-solving question where the figure is assumed to be drawn to scale. Now, what does that mean? It means we have a strategy to deal with a question like this. So I will teach it to you in a second, but go ahead and press pause, give this question a try yourself, and then we'll come back and we will do it together. Okay, so how'd you do with this question? Well, there's certainly geometry to be learned. And let me be upfront and say that if you want to learn that geometry, obviously I have an a la carte video on circles that explains this in detail. We go through it in my courses, and if you have questions about it below, you can put it in the chat area, in the comment area, and I can try to illuminate it. My job here is to show you the strategy, though. Your goal is to get a right answer whether you know how to do the math or not. I mean, you may recognize that this is what's called an inscribed angle, and that means that it's 1/2 the arc length of the exterior, or the arc that it creates on the circumference of the circle, which means that would be 70 degrees and so forth. And you might recognize that if these are parallel, that these are alternate interior angles, and that means they must be the same degree measure and so forth. And you can solve the question. But your job, like I said, is to get right answers. And so you had that response that said, wait a second, I see a figure, and the figure is drawn to scale. I can use that to my advantage. And what do we have in the question? We have a frame of reference, 18. 18 represents this length. And so it's almost like you're reading a map, right? This becomes like your key, right? That length, right? I'm just going to kind of redraw it over here. That length is like your key on your map. It literally represents 18 whatever long, 18 inches, 18 miles, it doesn't matter, but it's now our frame of reference. So that when the question asks what is the length of minor arc PQ, and we're looking for this arc here, we can use this key as a gauge. And here's what I would literally want you to do, right? I mean, if I put a gun to your head and said, wait, how long do you think that is, given that OR is 18, what could you do? I would literally want you to hold your scratch paper up to your computer screen on test day and put a little mark and say, okay, that is this long. How many of those are going to fit inside 18. Well, there's one of them, two of them, maybe three of them would fit inside there. What does that mean? That means each one of the segments is about 6, right? Like if I put a gun to your head and you had to guess, you would say, yeah, that means this is probably about 6. Which means since this is an arc, it's going to be a little bit longer, so it's going to be a little bit longer than 6, right? About 6, but a little bit longer than 6. So what does that enable you to do? It enables you to get a right answer, right? Why? Because we know what pi equals. Pi is about 3.14, or about 3. So what can we do? Well, 3 times 3 is 9. That's not going to be right? Because we already determined, because the figure is drawn to scale, that we now have a length that's going to be about 6. And because it's drawn to scale, and if you literally hold your scratch paper up to your computer screen, you can get very darn accurate as to how long that PQ is going to be. 9 pi over 2, so that would be like 9 times 3 is 27 over 2, it's like about 14, right? Way too big, and so forth. And this is going to be way too big. So the only ones you're left with are going to be A and B. Well, A is going to be like 2 times 3.14. 14 is about 6, guys, right? A little bit greater than 6. Isn't that what we determined it was going to be? Now you might be saying, okay, well 9 times 3, that's 27 divided by 4. That's like, it's almost 7 actually. So this is also 6 point something, but it's actually closer to 7. So really, worst case, you've got a 50-50 guess, right? Why? All because you recognize the strategy. Because you had that response that said, wait, it's a figure, it's a problem-solving question, figures are drawn to scale. Brett said my strategy is to eyeball, if I can, right? If it's a question that lends itself to that. And at worst, I have a 50-50 guess, and I would probably err on the side of being closer to 6 than I would to 7. Why? Because again, since it was drawn to scale, my scratch paper told me that it's really darn close to 6, probably not to 7. So there you go. You know, that is a strategy that you can use, and I hope you see in a question like this why strategy becomes so important. Remember, your objective is to get right answers. I want you to get answer choice A, whether you know how to do the math or not, because that's your objective. Your objective is to get a high score on the GMAT. My objective is to teach you how. I need you to start thinking outside the box a little bit to beat, to dominate the GMAT. Now outsmart the test takers or the test makers, and this is a strategy that will show you how to do just that. Okay, so there you have it, right? The 4 major strategies, the criteria for when to use each strategy, and I hope you see how valuable this is. I hope you see how empowering this can be. I want you to visualize yourself. I want you to think. I want you to picture yourself on test day and how liberating it's going to be when a question pops up on your screen and you immediately know how to move forward. Why? Because you recognize the type of question it is and you know how to apply it. And my guess is you fall into one of the 3 categories if you're watching this video. One, you might be brand new and you're just starting your GMAT journey, absolutely learn this stuff from scratch. The second category is maybe you've already taken the GMAT. Maybe you've actually done pretty well and you're just trying to boost your score. You may or may not have ever seen these strategies. Definitely learn to apply them, and if you're already familiar with some of the strategies, learn to apply them better, because proper execution is going to enable you to solve them more quickly, more effectively, more efficiently, saving you time and getting more right answers. And you may fall into a third category where you actually are a really good test taker and you're trying to crack 700. Guys, some of these strategies, especially the working backwards and the making up numbers strategies, are absolutely for 700 plus test takers, because when you get to some of the really hard questions, this is a great way to beat those questions. In fact, as we saw in the make up numbers question, the test makers thought that that variables question was pretty difficult. And also learn the wouldn't it be nice if strategy, because if you're looking to crack 700, it's going to help you with that as well. Now here's what I know. I know that these strategies work, and I know that they're going to be empowering for you, but I also know that you might fall flat on your face the first time you try. Right? Because it's one thing to know the strategies, it's another thing to know how to execute the strategies. Remember my video last week with the idea, or the last video with the idea of kind of falling flat on your face when I was wave riding. Sometimes that happens. Just because you know that you're supposed to make up numbers and you saw how easy it looked when I did it, the first time you try to do it on your own, it can be a little bit challenging. So I encourage you, use this page, use these resources, type your comments in the area below. If you're having trouble with particular questions, get help. Reach out to me. Say, hey, I think I'm probably supposed to make up numbers, but I'm having trouble doing that. Content we've covered. Strategy, it's here for the taking, but as I said, you need to learn to execute it. You need to learn how to practice in the most efficient way possible. That's what we're going to look at in the next video in this series, but I'm actually going to give you some bonus material. In the next video, I'm also going to do a segment on time management, because a lot of students get really good at content, they get pretty good at the strategies, but time management is so crucial if you're wanting to score high on the GMAT. So we're going to look at that in the next video. I'm excited about this. I can't wait to see your comments. So here's what I'd like you to do. Number one, click the like button. We all like it when somebody likes our stuff. We all like getting those likes. But then write your comments. And specifically, I'd like you to answer this question. Which of these strategies do you think is going to be most helpful for you? My guess is one of the four is going to be something new for you. Which of the four do you think is going to be most helpful? Or you could also answer this. Which of the four do you not quite understand maybe the way that you would hope that you could understand it, right? Whatever it is, encourage you to just participate in the community. It's the best way for us to all learn. I'm going to be reading your questions personally, and I'll respond as well to help answer any of your questions. But I'm also curious to see, again, which of these strategies you think you're going to find most helpful. So I'm excited to do that, and then I'm really excited to bring you the next video here to be released in a few days, so stay tuned for that. I will see you again in the next video. Ciao for now.